Привit moi druzy. Hello my friends, my name is Darren Gerdes and I'm trying to make sense of what's going on in Ukraine so that you can understand more effectively. If this video is helpful to you, please consider liking, sharing, or subscribing. We're going to talk about Bakhmut today, and there's a reason that we're going to talk about Bakhmut, and it's just been this real sore spot for the Russians for a long time. There's really, if you look at the map, not a lot of military value to Bakhmut. This is Bakhmut, and this is Bakhmut 5 months ago. The Russians were trying to take it, and with very little success. As in fact, 6 months ago, I could have unwound the clock that far, and it would have been the same thing. This is 4 months ago, what we're going to see here, and not much more. This is 3 months ago, and about the same. This is 2 months ago, and you started to see that Bakhmut is getting some push around Soledar, and then they're starting to encircle a little bit. Okay, this is in February 2nd. This is last month, and you see that they're really making some progress around it, and Ukraine is still deciding to stay there. But why are they deciding to stay there? Like, there's not really great military value. There's a high ridge back here that they can defend, so it's not like they're just going to roll all the way through here. But different sides have different motivations for defending it. So I'm going to talk about those motivations, and then I'm going to give you William McRaven's perspective on Bakhmut. So while we were this many months ago, and they couldn't take it, what they had to do was, if you zoom in on here, they have to cross this huge field, this open area, in order to get closer, and it was a bloodletting. It was just a terrible place for the Russian soldiers to be, trying to have to cross this in order to get into the city. Now they're across a little river, they're into the city some, but there's still lots of fighting. Prigozhin was trying to make his name there. The Russians, particularly Putin, wants to have a big victory there because they haven't had a major victory since the fall of Lysychansk, Severodonetsk and Lysychansk last July. So because they haven't had these wins, the Russians really want this area of Bakhmut, even though it's militarily and strategically not that important. On the other side, the Ukrainians are looking at this as if they can keep the attrition rate going for the Russians, and it's also become a symbolic place for them as well. So that's why they're there. But the spring offensive hasn't yet happened, and so the spring offensive is still to come, but we don't know exactly where on the map, but we're all tied up in Bakhmut. They wanted to fight, they wanted to not let them have it, and so here we are. But there was something really fascinating. While Prigozhin yesterday raised a Russian flag on the city hall in Bakhmut. Now here's where the city council building is in Bakhmut, and Prigozhin is claiming victory here. But he's claimed victory, 30 or more times already of Bakhmut. And I guess it's under the theory that if you dance long enough, it has to rain. I want you to hear how Admiral McRaven predicts what's about to happen in Bakhmut. This was from CNN.
So, raise the Wagner, not Russian flag near the center of the city. Where does the war go from here? Let me bring in my guest today, retired Admiral William McRaven. Before he retired from the military in 2014, McRaven led Special Operations Command, where he oversaw the U.S. military's most elite combat units. McRaven has another terrific new book.
Now, McRaven is the real deal, and he'll give you some perspective. It's not just attrition, there's more to it at play here than just that. Let's listen to him.
It is called The Wisdom of the Bullfrog, Leadership Made Simple but Not Easy. Bill, welcome.
Well, thanks, Fareed. Good to be with you.
When you look at this Bakhmut situation, Zelensky had to make a very important decision, which was whether to hold the line here. A lot of people say militarily this is not significant. Why devote so much space? He did it, and he seems to have so far resisted the Russian advance. Was it worth it, or was this a lot of Ukrainian manpower sacrificed for nothing?
Yeah, I actually think it was the right decision. And again, tactically, when you look at it militarily, as you know, about a month ago, his advisor said, look, we need to do an orderly withdrawal from Bakhmut because it's just not worth the cost of the soldiers we're losing. But I think what Zelensky looked at was, look, if we lose Bakhmut, it plays into Putin's narrative that the Russians are winning. And oh, by the way, it will bolster Russian morale. It will probably unduly affect Ukrainian morale. It could also affect support from Europe and the United States.
Now that's really important. So Zelensky's looking at factors not just militarily, because they were in kind of a dangerous place and looking like they could be encircled. I don't think they're going to be encircled, or at least not anytime soon. They'll make a decision when they have to withdraw, but the longer they can hold out, the longer they can keep bleeding the Russians, the better. But it's for morale as much as it is for the attrition rate, and I think that's an important thing to understand.
So while it is just a small tactical piece of ground, I think it has huge strategic implications. I think Zelensky understood this, and I think it was the right call.
How does Ukraine win against an enemy that, at the end of the day, is sort of many, many times bigger? The defense budget is 10 times bigger. The number of people Putin can call in are so much larger.
So I think winning looks like ensuring that Russia doesn't achieve its goals. So now
that's really interesting. Listen to how he describes what winning is. So the Russians are pretty unclear about what winning is. The Ukrainians are pretty clear that winning is pushing Russians off of their territory. But listen to how he describes winning in a different way.
The invasion first started, of course, there were these, Putin's narrative was, we're going to take Kyiv, we're going to come in through Kharkiv, come up through Crimea, come in through the Donbass, and we will essentially take Ukraine. Well, when that didn't work so well, then he moved the goalposts. And now it was about, well, we're going to build a land bridge from Donbass down to Crimea. And now he is struggling to do that. So if the Ukrainians can prevent the Russians from actually building that land bridge, then I think what it does is it forces Putin once again to move the goalposts. And frankly, sooner or later, failure is going to be on the radar for everybody that's watching this. So they don't have to take back the Donbass. They don't have to take back Crimea. I know they'd like to. What they've got to do is prevent the Russians from building that land bridge. And I do think they can do that.
Now, even more to the point, it looked like Russia was going to take Kyiv in 3 days and have the country under its thumb in 3 weeks. And we're at day 400 and change at this point. So the Ukrainians have won in that regard just by holding out this long, which is an interesting perspective. I'll let him conclude.
And do you think the key for the West is just give them all the weapons they can get?
Yeah, I'm a believer that we need to give them whatever it takes to win the war, whatever it takes for them to be successful. Now, there's been a lot of discussion about, do we help with the Europeans and give them MiG-29s? Do we give them ATACMS for their HIMARS? I trust General Mark Milley, one of the finest officers I ever served with, and obviously Secretary Lloyd Austin. Both of these gentlemen have incredible combat experience. So if they are kind of withholding the aircraft and withholding the ATACMS, I got to believe there's a good reason for that. But I think in general, the administration has kind of managed the war pretty well. Now what they've got to do is decide whether or not they want to win the war, and all that being the Ukrainians, helping the Ukrainians win the war.
So that's a really interesting perspective. And this is coming from a guy who's about as solid as a day is long, the former head of all special operations forces in the United States. So don't be alarmed when you hear that Bakhmut has fallen, Bakhmut has fallen, Bakhmut has fallen. At a certain point, it might have served its purpose, but its purpose so far has been to deprive the Russians of the moral victory of saying, see, we have done this. And it's absolutely amazing that the Russians have been stopped for months, since July, from making any significant gains. And in that regard, Ukraine's really winning. All right, that's all that I have to say. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.